My brother inherited everything because he earned it, but nobody smiled when the lawyer brought up the video evidence. Hey Reddit, my name is Daniel Ward, and the day the lawyer read my mother's will is the day every lie in my family stopped hiding. Nothing about that day felt dramatic. It felt like something that had been waiting for years, sitting under old habits and unspoken grudges, finally tearing through. Growing up, my brother Mark acted like he was the head of the family long before either of us reached adulthood. Our parents praised him for every small thing. Good grades, clean shoes, a steady job. They said he was dependable, focused, and loyal. I never argued with them. It wasn't worth the fight. Mark wanted control, and he built his way into it. When our mother got sick, he stepped in before anyone else had a chance. He moved into her house, handled her pills, took her to her appointments, and kept everyone updated. At least that's how he explained it. The rest of us noticed he started cutting people out little by little. Missed calls, excuses, sudden changes in schedules. But nobody pushed back. She trusted him. We followed her lead. When she died, we all expected a simple meeting with the lawyer. Nothing dramatic. The family gathered in a quiet conference room with a long table and thin chairs. There were no warm greetings, just nods and tired looks. I sat near the corner, not because I wanted distance, but because I didn't want the attention. My sister sat beside me, tense but quiet. My aunt and uncle kept their eyes low. Mark sat across from the lawyer with a proud posture, as if he already knew the ending and saw no reason to hide his confidence. The lawyer opened a folder and said the will update was done months before her death. Everyone nodded. We knew she handled her affairs early. Mark looked comfortable, too comfortable. He held a confident expression that made the room feel colder. The lawyer said Mark had been left with the entire estate. Every account, every property detail, every investment. Nothing about that surprised the family. Everyone expected him to get everything. He had taken charge of every decision. He had full access to all her records. He lived in her house the last year of her life. The rest of us were used to being treated as afterthoughts. None of us argued, but nobody smiled either. The lawyer didn't continue right away. Instead, he placed a flash drive on the table. Mark's face changed. Not a lot, just enough for everyone to notice. My aunt asked what the device held. The lawyer said it contained video evidence tied to conditions written into the will. He explained that our mother added those conditions after noticing a pattern of manipulation. He said Mark agreed to those conditions during a recording she requested. The lawyer said the video was mandatory for the meeting. Mark leaned back and said there was no need to view anything. His tone stayed calm, but his eyes shifted toward the lawyer's hands. He kept that proud posture, but it looked forced now. The rest of us stayed still, unsure how to react. Nobody wanted to make assumptions, but something felt wrong. My sister placed her hand over her mouth as if bracing herself for something heavy. The lawyer connected the flash drive to a laptop and explained that the footage documented the conversations that changed the terms of the will. He said our mother asked him to store the video in case the agreement was broken. Mark shook his head and said it was unnecessary to continue. The lawyer ignored him. The screen turned black for a moment before the video loaded. The first frame showed the living room of our mother's house, the same space Mark had controlled for months. She looked tired but aware. Mark stood near her chair, speaking to her with a serious expression. The audio wasn't loud, but every word carried through the room. The family stayed silent. Mark stared at the floor. He didn't try to defend himself. He didn't ask to stop the video. He didn't explain anything. His silence filled the room more than the footage did. Watching my brother on that screen felt strange. I knew he could be controlling, but I didn't know he would go this far. I didn't expect to see him cornering her while she looked too weak to challenge him. It didn't feel like a planned act. It felt like something he did without thinking anyone would ever see it. My aunt's expression darkened. My sister wiped her eyes. My uncle stayed rigid, jaw locked. I kept my hands still on the table, unsure how to feel. Anger didn't fit the moment. Shock didn't fit either. It felt more like confirmation of something everyone avoided thinking about. The lawyer paused the video. The room stayed silent for several seconds. He asked if anyone wanted to deny the accuracy of the footage. Nobody spoke. Mark didn't look up. I watched him stare at the carpet, the same way he used to stare at the ground as a kid when he knew he was caught doing something he shouldn't. He didn't shake. He didn't panic. He didn't speak. He just sat there, trapped between the person he pretended to be and the truth playing on the screen. The lawyer closed his laptop and said the video was only the beginning. There were recorded discussions, phone logs, and written notes our mother kept regarding his behavior. Everything was gathered for a reason. She wanted the family to understand why she changed the conditions of the will. The tension in the room turned heavier after that. My aunt crossed her arms and stared down at the table. My sister leaned close to me with a worried look. My uncle sat still, as if waiting for someone else to speak. I kept my focus on the lawyer, waiting for him to continue. Part of me wanted to walk out. Part of me wanted to hear the rest. There was no clean way to escape the moment. The truth was already open and sitting in front of us. The lawyer turned the folder around so the family could see the updated documents. He said he needed to explain the legal conditions before moving forward. That was where the next part of this mess began. The lawyer said the conditions needed to be explained with the rest of the footage, so he reopened the laptop and clicked the next file. Nobody moved. Nobody asked anything. Everyone watched Mark. Waiting for a reaction he refused to show. He kept the same frozen stare at the floor, hands pressed against his knees, shoulders locked in place like he was bracing for impact. The screen switched to another angle of the same living room. The camera sat on a shelf behind a set of books. My mother sat in her chair again, holding a stack of papers. She looked exhausted, but her focus stayed sharp. Mark stood in front of her with the same clipped tone he used when he didn't want anyone pushing back. The audio caught the entire exchange. He told her the rest of the family didn't care about her. He told her she needed to sign documents he prepared. He said he would handle everything alone because nobody else could be trusted. The words weren't loud, but they carried the kind of pressure that didn't need volume. Watching it didn't feel like discovering a secret. It felt like watching something that had been happening long before anyone realized. There was no yelling, no chaos, just steady pressure that pushed her into a corner she didn't have the strength to step out of. He spoke with certainty, like every sentence was a simple fact she needed to accept. She nodded a few times, not because she agreed, but because she looked too tired to defend herself. My stomach felt tight. I never imagined he would take advantage of her like that. I always assumed he was harsh but loyal. Seeing him push her when she looked so drained broke a part of the image I kept of him. The lawyer paused the video again. The room stayed completely still. My sister held her hand over her mouth the entire time. She didn't cry. She just stayed frozen. My aunt stared at the wall like she was trying to process years of behavior all at once. My uncle pressed his fingers together, keeping his arms tight against his sides. The lawyer played the next section. This one showed Mark pacing the living room, talking about the money. He spoke about handling her accounts. He spoke about moving her assets. He spoke about removing access from the rest of the family. He said he would cut everyone out. His tone was cold, not angry, not emotional, just firm, controlled, and final. My mother looked down at her hands while he spoke. She didn't raise her head until he finished. This wasn't a burst of stress. It wasn't a moment of frustration. It was intentional, planned, structured, all said with the confidence of someone who assumed nobody else would ever hear it. My sister's breathing shifted. My aunt whispered to herself. My uncle looked ready to stand, but didn't. I sat still. The room felt tight, as if the air had thinned. The lawyer didn't react. He kept his focus on the screen, hands folded. Mark kept the same expression. Eyes down, shoulders still. Not a single move to defend himself. The video showed another clip. This one taken later. My mother looked more alert. She confronted him about the pressure she felt. She told him she wanted the rest of the family involved. He responded by telling her she wouldn't get proper care if too many people interfered. The tone wasn't raised, but the message was clear. He wanted full control. The footage jumped to another day. My mother held a notebook. She flipped through pages while reading back parts of their talks. Her voice sounded steady. She said she had decided to speak to the lawyer alone. Mark looked irritated. He didn't hide it. He turned his back to her and paced the room. The footage ended there. The lawyer let the pause stretch. He asked if anyone planned to deny anything shown. Nobody said a word. Mark didn't lift his head. I watched him, not out of anger, but out of disbelief. He spent years shaping himself, as the responsible one, the dependable one, the loyal one, all while hiding moments like the one shown in the video. He never expected them to surface. He assumed she trusted him enough to keep everything private. He assumed she wouldn't record anything. The lawyer closed the file and opened the last clip. This one was shorter. My mother sat across from him at the dining table. Papers were spread out in front of her. She said she wanted him to understand that access to her accounts came with rules. She explained that she would update her will with conditions tied to the way he treated the rest of the family. She said she didn't want her estate to become a reason for conflict. In the video, Mark didn't argue. He kept a flat expression and nodded. He agreed to everything without hesitation. He knew what she wanted. He understood the conditions. He accepted them. That clip ended with her telling him she wanted the lawyer to hold the recordings. Watching her voice those statements made everything feel different. She wasn't confused. She wasn't manipulated into that decision. She made it because she saw something in his behavior she didn't trust. The screen went dark. The lawyer removed the flash drive and placed it back on the table. He said the footage was recorded across 4 months. He said she contacted him after noticing pressure and emotional tactics that didn't sit right with her. She wanted an objective record. She wanted protection for herself and the rest of the family. The tension in the room grew heavier when he listed each moment she brought concerns to him. Dates, times, notes she wrote, small incidents she documented, conversations she repeated in his office. My uncle shifted in his seat. My aunt exhaled slowly. My sister leaned closer to the table, staring straight ahead. I kept my hand still. The lawyer said the video served one purpose: evidence that Mark violated the agreement tied to the inheritance. He said the footage made the conditions clear. The will had been changed because she saw behavior she didn't want rewarded. Mark didn't lift his head or speak. His silence said enough. Not because it proved anything, but because it showed he had no defense to give. The lawyer moved the folder to the center of the table and said the legal conditions had to be reviewed before anything could move forward. The lawyer kept the folder open in front of him and turned the pages toward us. He said the conditions were added after my mother noticed a pattern she didn't want ignored. She didn't remove Mark from the will. Instead, she changed the terms so he would keep the inheritance only if he stayed respectful toward the rest of the family and didn't try to isolate her or anyone else. She wanted peace. She wanted cooperation. She didn't want the estate to become a tool for control. The lawyer explained that she wrote the conditions with clear language. If Mark pressured her or shut people out or tried to take control through fear or manipulation, the will would shift and the estate would be held for review. He said she documented each step because she knew Mark would challenge anyone who questioned him. She didn't want arguments. She wanted evidence. She recorded everything for that reason. The footage we had just watched proved he broke the agreement. It showed pressure. It showed attempts to cut the family out. It showed intent to take control beyond what she wanted. The lawyer said those actions were exactly what the conditions were written to prevent. The moment she saw his behavior go past what she considered acceptable, she contacted the lawyer and asked for the updates. Mark stayed silent through all of this. He didn't lift his head. His hands stayed locked together. His breathing stayed deep and slow. He looked like someone trying to hold a wall in place as cracks spread through it. My aunt leaned forward with her arms crossed. Her face showed nothing but tension. My uncle kept his eyes on the folder. My sister didn't move at all. She just stared at the table like she wanted the whole thing to end, but needed to hear it. The lawyer continued explaining how the will worked. He said my mother wanted Mark to inherit everything only if he kept the family bond intact. She wanted him to prove he could handle the responsibility without shutting everyone else out. She believed he could do that at first. She trusted his care. She trusted his focus. She believed he would keep her safe and keep the family together. When she started noticing signs of pressure, she didn't react right away. She waited. She watched. She took notes. She kept track of moments that bothered her. When the pattern grew clear, she decided the will needed protection. I listened to every detail, tried to connect them to the person Mark grew into. He always tried to lead. He always tried to take charge. The difference was that he used to be straightforward. He didn't hide things. Somewhere along the way, he shifted into someone who needed control more than trust. Watching him sit there now made that shift feel sharper. The lawyer flipped to another page. He said the will stated that the estate would be frozen if the agreement was violated. He said probate court had the final say. He said the video alone was enough to trigger a full review. The other records, notes, dates, voice messages only strengthened the case. He explained that the court would look at everything, not just the video. The footage, however, showed clear and direct actions that went against the conditions. Mark finally spoke, but only with a short comment about context. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't show anger. He just said the video didn't show the full picture. The lawyer said the issue wasn't context. The issue was behavior. The footage showed pressure. The conditions said pressure wasn't allowed. The agreement was broken. That was all the court needed. Mark pressed his lips together and stared at the folder. He didn't argue further. My sister whispered something under her breath, something meant for herself more than anyone else. My aunt shook her head slowly. My uncle leaned back, took a breath, and rubbed his hands together. The room felt tighter than it had earlier. Nothing explosive happened, but the tension built with each line, the lawyer explained. The lawyer pointed to the original signatures. My mother had signed the update with a steady hand. Mark had signed his part a few days later. His agreement wasn't forced. He understood the conditions clearly. There was no confusion. The lawyer confirmed that Mark had even asked questions during the process, making sure he understood what each part meant. That made the violation harder to defend. The lawyer explained that my mother wanted the inheritance to stay with Mark if he remained stable, cooperative, and fair. She believed he could do it as long as he didn't fall back into controlling habits. She didn't want the family to be divided. She didn't want tension after her death. She wanted her son to lead with honesty, not pressure. The video showed that he didn't follow those terms. The room stayed quiet while the lawyer laid out what would happen next. The estate would not be released. It would be placed on hold until the court reviewed the evidence. All accounts, properties, and assets would remain locked. Nobody could take anything. Nobody could sell anything. Nobody could move anything. Everything would stay frozen until the judge gave a final decision. Mark finally looked up. His jaw was tight. His eyes stayed focused on the documents, not on anyone in the room. He said the video was taken out of context. He said stress made things look worse than they were. He said he did everything for our mother. The lawyer repeated that context didn't matter. The conditions were simple. Pressure was not allowed. Isolation was not allowed. Attempts to block the family were not allowed. Every part of the footage showed exactly the behavior the will tried to prevent. Mark didn't respond. My sister lowered her hand from her mouth. My aunt turned her gaze toward the window. My uncle didn't move at all. I kept my focus on the lawyer. I couldn't bring myself to look at Mark. Not out of anger. Not out of judgment. It just felt strange to see someone I grew up with slip into a version of himself none of us expected. The lawyer closed the folder and placed his hands on top of it. He said the documents were complete. He said probate court would move forward with the review. He said we would receive notices about the dates once they were set. He said Mark would have a chance to speak if he wanted to. He said the family would be informed about everything as it progressed. Mark swallowed hard and asked if there was anything left he could do. The lawyer said the only thing left was to wait for the court. There were no shortcuts, no second chances. The agreement had been broken, and the judge needed to decide what to do with the estate. Mark didn't say anything else. The lawyer stood, gathered the folder, and thanked everyone for coming. The meeting wasn't over, but the information had reached its end. The family stayed seated for a moment. Nobody rushed out. Nobody spoke. The room carried a weight that made movement feel abrupt. Mark pushed himself up, placed his hand on the table, and walked out without looking at any of us. The lawyer finished explaining the conditions, and the room stayed silent long enough for everyone to feel the weight of it. The documents sat on the table like they were waiting for someone to make the first move. Mark finally lifted his head. His face looked tight, like he had been holding everything in since the first clip played. He didn't look at anyone. He kept his eyes on the lawyer, as if the rest of us didn't exist. He pushed a chair back and stood. His voice stayed steady, but his posture gave him away. His hands shook. His shoulders stayed tense. He said he deserved the entire estate because he handled every part of our mother's care. He listed everything he did. He brought up every visit, every appointment, every night he spent at her house. None of us denied his involvement. We knew he did most of the work. That wasn't the issue. The issue was what he did with the control he had. My aunt kept her arms crossed while listening. She didn't interrupt him. She only reacted when he claimed nobody visited her except him. That statement struck her. She told him the only reason people stopped visiting was because he pushed everyone away. He controlled the schedule. He changed the plans. He blocked calls. He told people she was too tired when she wasn't. Everyone in the room already knew that part, but nobody said it out loud until she did. Mark looked around the table like he wanted someone to back him up. No one did. He said the rest of us were ungrateful. He said he sacrificed everything for her. He said we didn't understand what caring for her was like. He spoke like the footage meant nothing, like the recordings didn't show what they showed. He didn't address a single moment from the clips. He avoided every part of the manipulation the lawyer laid out. He held on to the idea that the work he did erased everything else. The lawyer stayed calm. He didn't raise his voice or match Mark's frustration. He said emotional points didn't affect legal conditions. He said the will had clear rules. He said the violation was documented. The lawyer didn't look angry. He didn't look pleased either. He looked like someone doing his job. Mark stepped closer to the table and asked if there was anything left for him to do. The tone didn't sound like a request. It sounded like a demand from someone who still believed the situation could be pushed in his direction if he applied enough pressure. The lawyer said the probate court would make the final decision. He said the estate would stay frozen until then. He said nothing could be changed or negotiated. Mark didn't take that well. His jaw tightened. His hands curled. His breathing got louder. His reaction didn't come from fear. It came from losing control. He lived his whole life operating under the belief that he could shape every outcome if he stayed ahead of everyone else. This was the first time he couldn't change anything. He hit the table with his hand. The sound echoed through the room. My sister flinched. My aunt looked down. My uncle didn't move. I stayed still, watching him from the corner of my eye. He didn't yell. He didn't continue arguing. He took a few steps back, grabbed his jacket, and walked toward the door. He didn't look at any of us. Not even once. The door opened and closed behind him without a single pause. The room stayed quiet after he left. Nobody rushed to follow him. Nobody tried to calm him down. Everyone just let the silence settle. It felt heavy, but it also felt like something inevitable had finally happened. The lawyer collected the documents and said the court would contact us when the review process began. My aunt nodded. My sister wiped her face and took a slow breath. My uncle stood but didn't speak. I waited until everyone else moved before standing myself. The air felt different now that he was gone. Not lighter, not calmer, just different in a way that made the rest of us accept that nothing about this was going to repair quickly. The meeting ended without any more words. That was the moment the family realized the situation would not return to normal. The weeks after the meeting moved slow. The family kept distance from each other, not out of anger, but out of exhaustion. Nobody wanted to talk about the footage again. Nobody wanted to pick apart the pieces of what happened. Everyone waited for the court to look at the evidence and make the final choice. The judge needed every file, every note, every recording, and every document tied to the will. The lawyer handled everything, and we waited. I stayed quiet through most of it. I didn't reach out to Mark. I didn't send a message or ask for an explanation. There was nothing left to ask. The footage gave every answer. It showed how long it had been happening and how open he felt about doing it. I tried to think of moments when he acted different, but none came to mind. Every memory lined up with the person he was on those recordings. My sister called once to check in. She didn't mention the case. She didn't bring up Mark. We talked about normal things which felt strange but easier than digging into the truth. My aunt and uncle stayed busy with work. The whole family moved in separate lanes while the case waited on the judge's desk. The lawyer called one afternoon and said the hearing was set. It wouldn't be long. The judge had reviewed most of the material already and asked for a short session to finalize everything. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel eager. It felt like another step in something that had been forced into motion the moment the flash drive hit the table. The courtroom felt smaller than I expected. Plain seats, plain walls, no crowd, just the judge, the clerk, the lawyer, and the family. Mark didn't show up. Nobody acted surprised. The lawyer said he had been notified multiple times. The judge asked if he sent any request for delay. He hadn't. My aunt sat on the left side of the room with my uncle beside her. My sister sat next to me, staring straight ahead. I kept my hands folded and waited. The lawyer stood near the front with a stack of files. The judge flipped through them, page by page, without speaking. When the judge reached the section with the footage summary, he took his time reading every line. He didn't rush. He didn't glance over anything. He reviewed the conditions my mother wrote, the agreement Mark signed, the notes she kept, and the timeline the lawyer built from the recordings. It took a long time. Nobody moved while he read. When he finished, he looked at the file with the same calm expression he held since the session started. He said the evidence showed clear violations of the conditions my mother set. He said the footage made the intent behind the pressure unmistakable. He said the agreement Mark signed held legal weight. If he wanted full control of the estate, he had to honor the rules she created. He didn't. The judge said there was no basis to grant him any special rights under the updated will. He ruled that the estate would be divided evenly among the family. He said the footage and documents showed that was my mother's true intent after the manipulation came to light. He said her decision was clear. He said the law supported that choice. There were no reactions in the room. No shock. No relief. No celebration. Just quiet acceptance. I looked at my sister. Her expression stayed steady. My aunt nodded once, not in victory, but in understanding. My uncle let out a slow breath. The judge signed the order and handed it to the clerk. The lawyer stepped forward to collect it. He said the division would be processed within days. He said everyone would receive updated documents to sign. The judge asked again if Mark planned to contest anything. The lawyer said he had not filed an objection or appeal. The judge said he still had the right to try, but the evidence made success unlikely. My sister stared at the floor when she heard that. Not because she felt bad for him. It was the kind of exhaustion that comes from watching someone destroy their own future. When the hearing ended, everyone stood at the same time, but didn't speak to each other. We walked out of the courtroom and stood near the entrance for a few seconds. Nobody knew what to say. My aunt finally said it was better this way. She didn't say it with joy. She said it with the calm of someone who saw a problem get handled without needing another fight. I didn't argue. I didn't add anything. I didn't have a reason to. The lawyer met with each of us outside and handed us folders with the documents we needed to sign. The paperwork wasn't long. It was simple and clear. I signed my copy without asking questions. The lawyer said the entire process might feel strange, but it wasn't uncommon. He said cases like this happen more than people wanted to admit. Family pressure, hidden behavior, last-minute changes to wills. None of it shocked him. My sister asked if Mark could still try to challenge it. The lawyer said he could, but the evidence gave him almost no chance. The conditions were written in his own handwriting. The footage came from devices he set up himself. The statements he made were direct. My mother's final notes were consistent. The judge's ruling covered every angle. After the documents were taken back, the lawyer walked away, leaving the family standing in silence. Nobody lingered long. My aunt and uncle left first. My sister and I walked to the parking lot without speaking. When she reached her car, she looked at me for a moment. There wasn't anything to say, so we didn't force it. She got in and drove off. I sat in my own car for a few minutes, staring at the courthouse doors. The entire situation felt heavy, but also settled. Not in a satisfying way, not in a clean way, just settled. The ruling didn't feel like a win. It didn't feel like something to celebrate. It felt like the ending of a problem that should have never started. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to watch him lose everything. I just wanted the truth to be seen for what it was. The estate would be divided. Mark would receive nothing beyond the items that were listed for him. The judge's words stayed in my mind while I drove home. Clear violations, clear intent, clear consequence. Nothing about it felt dramatic or shocking. It felt inevitable once the footage surfaced. That was the final decision. After the judge's decision, the house felt emptier than it had in years. Mark stopped contacting anyone. Phone calls went unanswered. Messages went unread. He moved out of town almost immediately, leaving behind everything he once claimed as his. The family didn't argue or chase him. Nobody felt the need to convince him to stay or to explain the ruling. He had removed himself from the equation entirely. The house was sold within months. The money from the sale, along with the estate, was divided evenly among the siblings and relatives named in the will. Each of us received our portion quietly. Nobody celebrated. Nobody argued over the numbers. It felt more like settling accounts than winning a battle. The lawyer mentioned it was rare for conditions like the ones our mother set to actually influence the final outcome, but he didn't linger on it. The estate was divided, the law had taken its course, and the family moved forward in its own way. I kept my share and left it at that. There was no rush to invest it, no need to flaunt it. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel victorious. Relief was the only thing that lingered. Relief that the truth was recorded and verified. Relief that no one could manipulate the story of her final years. Relief that Mark's actions no longer controlled the outcome of her estate. But relief wasn't happiness. It wasn't satisfaction. It was simply an absence of chaos. The house, once filled with arguments, quiet grudges, and whispered tensions, was gone. Memories remained, but they were quieter now. The family stayed distant, not from anger, but from a shared understanding of boundaries. No one brought up the video again. Nobody needed to. It was a silent agreement that the past had been exposed, and there was no reason to relive it. Life continued, but in a measured way. My sister focused on her work and personal life. My aunt and uncle returned to their routines. Birthdays, holidays, and family gatherings happened, but always with an unspoken caution. Mark's absence was a presence in itself, a reminder of what had been and the consequences of his choices. I moved forward with the parts of my life that mattered outside the estate. I traveled, pursued projects, and kept my relationships with people who mattered. Money didn't change who I was. It didn't alter my family dynamic except to remove the source of conflict. The house of my mother, the arguments over access and control, the silent manipulation, it all became history. Time passed. Occasional mentions of the estate came up in conversation, but no one dwelled on the details. There was no gloating, no rehashing of evidence. The family stayed quiet, careful, and composed. Mark remained distant, a figure removed from our lives entirely. The split had ended the tension, but left a gap no one tried to fill. I didn't expect closure. I didn't feel like anything was truly resolved. But the truth had been seen, the estate distributed fairly, and the family, though distant, was able to function without confrontation. That was enough. The past stayed where it belonged. The day the final papers were signed, I looked around and noticed no one lingered. Nobody waited for explanations. Nobody wanted validation. Everyone walked away with their share, and the remaining silence was the only acknowledgement needed. I left the office quietly, carrying nothing but the knowledge that the truth had been shown and that Mark's actions could no longer dictate our family story. That was the end. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps the channel and lets us bring you more and better stories.